Hello. So I would like to go over the adverse impact report with you so that it'll ease your understanding of the situation and make it easier to interpret. We're going to start with the outcomes, but these will make more sense to you as we roll through this report. As you can see in this report, the 80% rule shows violations with the red X's for gender, ethnicity, and age. The chi-square test, which we'll talk about soon, shows the same pattern. And then the ANOVA, which is only used for ethnicity, it's got a green check, so it's not indicating any sort of adverse impact. The flat bars you see indicate that the test is not used for that particular set of groups. So, what type of report have we run here? This is our simplest report. It's the single assessment post selection report. And I ran this report based on Monte Carlo data that I made up to demonstrate a few things, but in the report, we're using cognitive test scores. And since we're measuring adverse impact, it's impact with protected groups against those that are unprotected groups. So the referent groups or the unprotected groups in this report are male, ethnicity white, and referent age under 40. As you'll see as we go into the report, you'll see green text and red text. It'll be important that you understand what that means, and I'll go into more detail as we come to it. Okay, so let's look at the descriptive statistics for this report. There's some really valuable information that you can look and gather from this page. The total number of applicants are 1,108. That's very important. How many are in your data set? If your data set had more or fewer than these, there may be an issue and you need to recheck your data. These other issues, such as standard deviation, mode, skewness, whatever, are more detailed descriptors of the data set. For example, you've got a minimum score of 1 and a maximum score of 100. That tells us the range of data. The standard deviation is just how far each score on average differs from the average score. And the mode tells us the most often occurring score. And the mean is the average. We'll skip skewness and kurtosis for the purposes of this discussion. Descriptive statistics by subgroup. So these are similar statistics, but it's a breakdown of the different subgroups. So example, for males, you'll see a total of 702 with a mean of 59.219 on the test. So this means that 702 males were in the data set, and this is their average score. The range of scores are 1 to 98. This is important information. Suppose you saw a score that was 101 and your test only went to 100. It's important that you look at this type of information to verify the validity of your data. Let's look at ethnicity. You can see different race categories, and you can see that as with the gender, you can see the total, the average, the minimum, and maximums. This information will be used later in this report to help calculate adverse impact statistics. For age, we have the same pattern, under 40 and over 40. It's important to realize that under and over 40 are the convenient groups that we use for this, but there may be times when you need to look at age with different ranges and with different cuts. So let's move to the histogram section of this report. This information is used to help understand the distribution of data. As you can see, this chart is frequency by test scores. Along the bottoms, you can see the test scores ranging from 1 to 100, and the frequency of those scores can be determined by looking at the height of the bars. This first and topmost chart is focused on the entire population. And that's very interesting information, but now we're interested in the subsets of the population. So let's look at the smaller charts below. As you can see for the gender histograms, male scores are centered around the middle, but they point toward the right. So males made a lot of mid-range scores, but then many of their scores were on the higher end. This pattern is the opposite for females in this particular data set. They have a small grouping around the center, but their scores skew to the left. This will be important because these differences will show up in the analyses that we discuss further down the page. So now let's look at the ethnicity histograms. And there are some interesting patterns here. You'll notice that for whites, Hispanics, and African Americans, The scores are almost evenly distributed across the entire testing group. This is very different whenever you look at the native Hawaiians or other Pacific Islanders group. Notice that their scores, there are fewer of them and they're grouped in the center. And this same pattern holds for Asian and American Indian groupings, as well as two or more races. But then look at unknown. Something different's happening here. Notice how all the data are gathered in the center and how this is a large group. There are a lot of people, and for some reason, the test scores behave differently for them. They ended up clumping in the center. Okay, let's discuss some of the selection graphs that we have. These are quite convenient and can help you understand the data at a glance. You'll notice on the upper left, the male group has 360 people who were selected, 342 who were not selected. It's interesting to notice that the two bars are relatively close in number and relatively even, but this is not the case when we view the female bars. Note that 150 females were selected while 256 were not. So the ratio of females being selected is not equal to the ratio of males being selected. This will become more obvious as we move through the report. The next table helps us understand the selection rate versus the number hired. As you can see, one side of the chart tells us the selection rate, and the bottom of it tells us the number hired. This chart looks at males and females, and you can see that with 150 females that were selected, their selection rate was a little below 40%. The selection rate for males was higher than that, and roughly 360 people were hired for males. You can get the actual numbers above. Okay, now let's look at selection and not selected by ethnicity. Along the bottom of the chart, you'll see all the different ethnicities, and you can see the selection and not selection rates. Note the large group of unknowns at the end. The final chart on this page is the selection rate by race. Note that along the bottom, as once again, you can see the number of people and the ratios. Note how many whites and unknowns there were in the group. This is reflective of the data above. Age breakdowns. Age issues are a common place that we deal with in this field, although under 40 and 40 over are not always the break points, but they tend to be. If you have special needs in this situation, please reach out to us. As you'll notice that the under 40 group, we have 144 people who were selected versus 86 who weren't, whereas the 40 and over group had 366 selected while 512 were not. Once again, we'll see this reflected below in the ratios that we discuss. The final two charts are a pie chart and a graph that indicates frequency by age and allows you to have more proportional view. You'll note that in large, the 40 and over group outnumber the under 40 group. And this is reflected across the diagram as well below. So now comes the exciting part where we turn the information that we described earlier into statistics that allow us to understand the adverse impact of this data set. The first example, you can see males have a selection rate of 51.3%. And in this case, males are the reference group. That means that they are not the protected class. Females, on the other hand, are the protected class, and you notice that their pass rate is 36.9%, and it's in red. The adverse impact ratio, which was referred to as the 80% rule, is computed by dividing 36.9 by 51.3. This produces 0.72. It is red in an indicator of potential adverse impact because the 0.72 is less than 80. It would be 72% versus 80%. So this is an indicator of potential adverse impact for females. The next group is age, and we've got them categorized as under 40 and 40 and over. In this instance, the non-protected class or the reference class, which is under 40, has a selection rate of 62.6%, while the 40 and over have a selection rate of 41.7%. As you compute the 80% rule as described above, you'll notice that the value is 0.67. This value is less than zero point 0.8, therefore it's indicative of potential adverse impact. Now let's discuss the ethnicity results. As you can see, white is the referent group in this table. Compared to the other races, in most cases, white has an 80% rule of greater than zero point 0.8. Therefore, you can see the values 104, 104, 1.11. All these that are not red indicate that there's no evidence of adverse impact. However, in contrast, the Native Hawaiian and American Indian groups are in red, and you can see by the ratios for Native Hawaiian, other Pacific Islander, the selection rate is 12.5%. When you divide that by 45.1%, which is the selection rate for whites, you get 0.28. This 0.28 is less than 0.80, therefore, that's evidence of adverse impact using the 80% rule. The same pattern follows for American Indians and Alaskan Natives. Okay, so now we have additional adverse impact measures. And in this instance, we're using what's referred to as the chi-square test. The chi-square test is evaluated by looking at the significance value. When a significance value is less than zero point 0.5, it's an indicator of a group difference. However, as you can see on this page, some group differences are in red and some are in green. The red chi-square values indicate that there's a potential for adverse impact in that group. The green chi-square values indicate that even if a difference were to exist, it would be in the direction of the protected class. Therefore, no findings of adverse impact are evident. This part of the report is what we refer to as an analysis of variance or ANOVA. The ANOVA should only be applied when there are three groups or more. In this instance, the significance of the ANOVA is 0.206. 0.206 is higher than the standard scientific significance level of 0.05. Therefore, there's no indication of differences between groups within this data set. Should the ANOVA be red or the probability be less than 0.05, then that would warrant further investigation using what we refer to as follow-up tests. So now I begin looking at the data broken down by decile. Breaking the data into deciles allows us to break it into 10 different groups and to look at the adverse impact based on the pass rates within those groups. This will make sense after we talk through decile 1 and we move to 2. It will make more sense to you. If you remember earlier in this presentation, I discussed how the test had a range of scores of 1 to 100. You'll notice that the cut score for the decile score is 82 in this instance. This means that anyone with test scores that are greater than or equal to 82 will be included in this group. Those people and only those people will be used to conduct the adverse impact analyses. So, as an example, you can see in the gender group we have 702 males in total and 406 females in total. However, in this decile, it breaks down to 90 and 24. So that means that of the 702 males, 90 of them passed. Of the 406 females, 24 of them passed. So this allows us to compute the adverse impact ratio. As you can see, the female pass rate is 5.911%. And that divided by the male pass rate gives us an 80% rule of 0.461. So this is an indication that for females in the top decile, if you decided to put your cutoff score at 82, for females, you would see pretty marked adverse impact. For ethnicity, we see a somewhat similar picture where for whites, Hispanics, Latinos, Black, and African American groups, their pass rates are all close enough to the pass rate of the referent group, which is whites, so that their 80% rule computations result in a value that's greater than 0.80. So there's not any evidence of adverse impact. As you look down for the other races that are all covered in red, you can see that there were no people hired here. So they have a 0% pass rate. So, of course, it's going to show adverse impact when compared to whites. We see a similar pattern with the age group. You can see where the 40 and over group pass rate is far lower than the pass rate for the under 40 group. The 40 and over group is obviously the protected class. So as you can see, the four-fifths rule results in a computation of 0.524, which is below zero point 0.8 and therefore significant. Another wonderful feature of this report is that it allows you to keep an eye on your numbers. So your total candidate count is 1108 and your candidates in this decile are 114. This can be very useful when you're trying to look at all the deciles and keeping track. So I promise you that this will make more sense when I look at decile 2, and I'm going to make that happen. Notice how the score up here, the score for decile 1, the cut score is 82. As you notice, when I look at decile 2, the cut score is 0.64. So that means that every person in the data set whose test score was greater than or equal to 64 will be in this group. So this will include the people that were on page 1 and the new group. So notice here that in this sense, males, the number is still 702, for females 406. But now at the cut score of greater than or equal to 0.64, 198 males are passing and 24 females are passing. This results in an adverse impact ratio of 0.210, which is far less than the 0.80 we expect. Therefore, adverse impact appears to be present for gender. For ethnicity, you see a similar pattern to those above. Note how, like in the first decile calculations, we still have no passing here for these groups. The 40 and over situation is similar here, where the referent group pass rate is much higher than the protected group with an adverse impact ratio of 0.399. So I'm going to scroll through these a little faster so you can see the pattern. So now we're at decile 3. Notice that things are changing. There are more people in the group, and notice that now some people are passing in these ethnicities where we've seen problems. So now at least we have a pass rate, though the 80% rule values are all still less than 0.80. Therefore, adverse impact still exists. It's just to a lesser degree. And you can see the same pattern with the 40 and over. So now we'll move to decile 4. And notice how things are starting to pick up. Things are starting to clean up. Females still have adverse impact, but their ratio is now 0.70. This means that the ratio of females passing is closing in on the ratio of males passing as we lower the cut score to 0.57 in this sense. Note how, unlike before, Asian no longer violates the 80% rule, nor do two or more races are unknown. Native Hawaiian slash Pacific Islander and American Indian slash Alaska Native still are in the red, as is 40 over. So let's move to decile 5, and you can see the picture changes again. Now we have American Indian, Alaska Natives now have enough of their people passing that their ratio is now 0.949. So it no longer violates the 80% rule. Unlike them, Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islanders, they still have a low pass rate, a 25% pass rate, and their 80% rule value is 0.543. So they are still violating that value. As you can see with age, we have a better adverse impact value than we did previously, but it still violates. It's still below zero point 0.8. Okay, we're moving on to decile 6. Look at this. For gender, we still have adverse impact showing, but for ethnicity and age, it's cleaned up. The way to interpret this is to say that at a cut score of greater than equal 51, which means that everyone in the data set who scored greater than or equal to 51, when we look at all those people, most of our ethnicity and age adverse impact has gone away. So this might be a good argument with respect to age and ethnicity that you might want to set your cut score lower to avoid adverse impact there. But wait, we still have adverse impact with females. Let's see if that changes as we move through. Let's go to decile 7. Okay, decile 7, you can see we still have no adverse impact for ethnicity and age. But look at the gender. It's still not changed much. We have 612 males and 180 females who have received a pass score, but we still have an adverse impact value of 0.509. So let's see if we change the cut score again. Let's look at decile 8. Okay, we're at decile 8 and we still see the same pattern. Notice that we have a cut score of 38 now. So this means that whenever you apply a cut score of 0.38 to the set, you're still going to see adverse impact for females, although you don't see it for other groups. Moving on to decile 9, we see that adverse impact for female remain, but it's gotten better. We're now at 0.748. So we've moved the ratio in the right direction. So now let's discuss decile 10. This is designed to give you a broad view of the data. Notice the cut score in this instance is greater than or is equal to 1. This gives you a view of everyone passing the test and all the numbers. Obviously, if you were to set this cut score, everyone would pass, and this would just give you an overview of the pass fails. And as you can imagine, in this instance, since everyone passes, all of the adverse impact values will be 1 because everyone has the same pass rate. Okay, let's move on to the findings page of the report. As you can notice, adverse impact was detected for the groups that are shown. So with 80% rule, we had adverse impacts for females 40 and over, Native Hawaiian, other Pacific Islanders, and American Indian and Alaskan Native. We saw a somewhat similar pattern using the chi-square test, although American Indian and Alaskan Native were not found to have significant impacts. As we move down, we can see a per decile analysis in the table below. And as you can see in each decile that's aligned on the left, you can see where adverse impact is indicated. For example, adverse impact for females carried through the test from decile 1 to decile 9. No matter what the cut score, females had adverse impact. But you'll notice the pattern with 40 and over, and the same one with Native Americans, where yes, as the decile was higher, they had inverse impact. But once you got down to decile 6, that adverse impact went away. You can see the same pattern for Asians at decile 4, for American Indians and Alaskan Natives at decile 5, two or more races at decile 4, and unknown at decile 4. This gives you a good idea when you're setting the cut scores. If you set a cut score at a certain place, what type of impact will you have, and how do you intend to deal with it? Finally, we would like to offer to you the opportunity to find expert help. There's a View Consultants button on the bottom of this sheet. Feel free to click the button and reach out to one of our experts who will be more than happy to help you understand this report or to do further analysis for you if the need is indicated. Thank you.